Well, good evening, sales team leaders. Those of you aspiring to be a sales team leader, or those of you that are tuning in to lend an ear to the sales team leadership program, which of course is STEAMroom. Do hope that you have jumped on and subscribed. I'll mention it later in the show, but if you've subscribed to our Steam channel on YouTube, where you can catch up on past episodes of STEAMroom. Well, this is now session 8, so we're doing this fortnightly now, and the title of this one is quarter time. So we're moving into the final quarter. Obviously, the prohibits or the constraints which we talked about in the last episode of lockdown, they're starting to lift, or at least we're seeing it. And look, yes, things could slip back prematurely, but as I was saying in the last episode, the future does arrive, and invariably we're going to be looking forward from here. So in looking forward, what I'm saying openly to most principals, and we started to allude to this in the last session, is that you really ought to be looking at how you're making a connection with active property sellers. And you know, the theme that we have insofar as prospect is concerned, and more on that later, for STEAM, for sales team leaders, is automation. So eventually we want you to move into a space of completely taking control of the prospecting inside the company. I find that this is just a hot potato, and I've got to say this, it's in most real estate businesses, we put too much emphasis, or even some cases the blame, especially when it's not doing well, on the sales team and the sales team members, expecting them to be responsible for the procurement of new business and bringing new business in. Now, I'm not saying that that expectation shouldn't exist, but you shouldn't be solely dependent upon that. I'll say the same thing to you as a sales team leader as I openly say to salespeople, and that is that prospecting is dead easy. I mean, so long as you're engaging with property sellers on a significant local basis, you're going to find prospects. I also say to salespeople openly that all prospecting methods work, but let's face it, some work better than others. And if there's one thing that I share with salespeople and really push upon them, are those 4 prospecting tests. And I do want to make, I guess, an emphasized point of this here today. And that is that, you know, there's 4 factors or 4 litmus tests that we apply to any prospecting method. And far be it from me to be sitting here and denigrating, because there'll be more on this, you know, over the next quarter when I start to talk more about prospecting. I talk about a state of origin, which I did allude to in the last episode, but, you know, about the company eventually wresting total control of the prospecting, not least of which to make it a profitable income stream, because you know, your salespeople have no problem, nor do real estate businesses, it appears to me, on paying a 20% or thereabouts referral to a lot of these third-party referrers, and I will be dealing with that as well over the next quarter. But we pay that, so why not create the same inside of your own business? So we say the state of origin is that you want to have is one where the company is generating the lion's share of the new and incoming business, and that indeed the company is profiting from this because it's retaining, and it's the words you use, I've got to say this, if you move down this path, that the company is retaining 20% of the fee, and that 20% that's held back in retention is to, in part, reinvest back in more prospects, certainly to, or all of that money can be reinvested, certainly to the point where you have a surplus of listing opportunities. So once you get those markets to saturation point and you are enjoying the income stream of origin, as we call it, and that money is coming in, it then becomes profitable. And you're also, the add-on or the knock-on effects of this are just going to be astounding. I will share more on this, how you run the install and what you do. But I just want to start by saying this, that as you are exploring various prospecting methods, can I make it clear that you need to apply what I call the 4 prospecting tests to any method that you are considering taking on board. The first of those tests is, what is basically the conversion? So what is the ratio of how many calls you have to make to how many listings you get? So how many calls utilizing this particular method do I have to engage before I have an active property seller? So what's the conversion? Now, to me, that's probably the most important, being lazy, because I don't want to have a method where I'm just not getting listings from it. You know, always remember that the purpose of prospecting is not to populate a database. It's not to build a contact list. I know that I sometimes allude to doing this, but I do not mean that that's its primary function. The purpose of prospecting is to secure listings. So when we're looking at a method, you know, we always should be focused upon those methods that readily produce results relatively easy. So the conversion ratio is quite high. What is the success ratio? Yeah. So if I can, and I'll just share some of these with you. You know, I've already talked about at length the sales inquiry log. If you build a sales inquiry log to the level, I'm not going to go into the detail about this because I've done this on previous episodes, but if you build it to the right extent and you are housing all of the incoming inquiry, be it from open for inspections, be it from the internet, be it from whatever other mediums that you are using to promote property, all the way down to for sale signs and pointer boards and the like. If all of this is housed in and you allow that to mature and you call it in that window when they're receptive to prospecting, the conversion ratio is 5 to 1. Now, let's face it, it's very simplistic in that all of the people that are calling for sales inquiry, whether buyers or sellers, they may not have the capacity to buy or sell real estate, but they have the willingness, so they're interested. So of course your ratio is going to be high. Now, when you compare this with some, you know, onerous method where you're just putting a leaflet out that says market appraisals and in they come, then the whole thing just goes to shit. And I've got to say this, you are not utilizing prospecting methods. The purpose of prospecting is not to gain market appraisals. This convoluted ideal was just founded upon this concept that, you know, you build or meet people and build this up to actually service them later. I still subscribe to the fact that there are more than enough property owners that are moving from a state of dormancy to becoming active every month. And if you can create a direct connection with them, and this opportunity is readily afforded to the agency on a grand scale, then you can create a surplus of listings independent of ever having to worry about those more protracted methods. So that's the first consideration. I say, what's the conversion ratio? Yep. The second consideration is, what is the quality of the listing that is derived from that particular method? And if we're to be totally honest, the reality is that some prospecting methods produce a better quality listing than others. And I can prove this all the way down to when I'm actually talking to salespeople that are in the foothold stage or sales associates, and they're prospecting for new listings, some of which are on busier road locations. Well, these are not necessarily a good quality listing, because quite often the owner's expectation of price is significantly high. And because we've solicited the opportunity, we're receiving it. Yes, we get the signboard, but what are the prospects of selling that property? Often not very good. Generally speaking, I say openly, those prospecting methods where we are marketing to the point where active property sellers contact us, these generally produce a better quality listing than those that we run out and solicit. And coincidentally, isn't this funny? Even in the prospecting that I've been teaching, as I go around the traps in just a moment, even the prospecting methods that I have been teaching, all of our sales associates of late, all the way through to our sales professionals in through the sales trainer mentor platform and the list and sell tour, all the way through to the real estate rock stars, I'm pretty much saying the same thing. I'm saying, look, focus on methods that create a presentation by invitation rather than solicitation. You want it to look so good that sellers are actually inviting you in to check you out because they've looked at your product and it is resonating with them well. So that's the second consideration. We want to focus on methods that produce a better quality listing, one that we're going to sell quite readily. The third method is, and this is one that I really have to bring up, the cost. I say, how much money or how much time needs to be invested in that particular method for us to hit significant pay dirt. Now, this is probably my real hankering, my real distaste for some of those third-party referrers like Open Agent, which I'm happy to say openly, where they're actually looking to solicit a 20% hankering, but all they're really doing is throwing you into a pit bull fight to win a listing, typically on fee. Yes, I know that they promote out there in the broader market that, you know, they rate agents. This is just not true, but they say that they go in and they, you know, direct you to the better agent. Really, all they're doing is directing agents, and it's a race to the bottom. So they get them all to sign those agreements. They throw, you know, any number of them the opportunity, and then it just becomes a race to the bottom on fees or other giveaways to see whether they can get it. All the while, you're not only pushed into a position where you're giving money away, so there's your first cost. Then your second one, you're pushed into having to get into you're contesting with others, so you're already giving 20% away, but it's even more compounded with the fact that there's this request for you to discount fee, which if you look at a later editions, as I start to engage that very subject inside your business and explain to you that you just don't want to go down the path, particularly by way of consignment selling, where you become a discount agency. If you make that decision, that's fine. You'll be cannon fodder for me and my people that I'd be training, but I just don't see the need because we sell by way of consignment. So the opportunity to increase that incentive, so long as it's explained the right way, makes a lot more sense. So finally, that's the third consideration. I'll just bring them back up to the top, the list to sell ratio. So how many people or contacts do you have to speak before you can convert it over? What's the quality of each listing? What's the cost in time and or money using that method? And last but by no means at all least, how easy is that method to repetitively engage over and over and over again? Now, I think of late, this is the big thing that I was talking about last week. So we look at those 4 tests and I say, how easy is it to do? Anything that requires somebody kind of psych themselves up. And look, you know, I've looked at this with so many different real estate agencies over the years where they'll say that they're having trouble getting salespeople to engage in a particular method. and I start looking at it, I always remember probably the thing that sticks most uppermost in my mind. I had one of my sales team leaders come to me once and he said, because they just installed a new software system that was able to report on delinquency, on follow-ups of whatever salespeople had put in. And I know this is, it sounds that course, they all do that now, but I'm just going back from years ago. And, the sales team leader said, I just can't seem to get them to call. Look at this long, protracted list of delinquent contacts, people that we have failed to follow up when we promised that we would. And as I was looking through the list, I just couldn't help myself, because also in this list, you're able to ascertain those that hadn't been followed up, whether or not they'd listed with other agencies. And of course they hadn't. And I said, look, they've all got a similar characteristic. He said, what's that? I said, none of them are actually listed with anyone. So the reason that they're listed as missing contacts could it possibly be that the salesperson has been smart enough to realize that these people aren't selling. And that's why they're not being followed up. Your job is not to actually crack the whip and get salespeople to engage in mindless activity around prospecting. Yes, I know that's something they do down in what I refer to as the prospecting salt mines. They're constantly like, get on the phone. What number of calls have you made? Have you spoken to enough people? This is all good stuff, so long as the strategy is sound. Your job is to direct salespeople toward the most efficient and productive methods that are relatively progressive in the scheme of things. Once you crack markets, you want to hold that position and not have to back off on it. I make these points pretty straightforward because as a follow-on from what I was talking about last week, and as I go around the traps with each of the agencies, with each of the training products, and I look, so for example, with our sales associates that are engaging some activity in and around property careers prospector school. And the major thing that I've had them engaging on at the moment has been, in the first instance, the orientation of their prospecting nature. I'm not going to reiterate all that because I think I did a pretty good job the last time we're on. But I just said, like, you've got to make all of your conversation purely and simply, once you've identified that seller, centric to the motive. I went on further to teach those students, the sales associates, on what constitutes a motive, what it's made up of, and how to search for that motive. Because as soon as you get into that position and there's a mutual trust built around that relationship, then that seller will not, when they start to ask your advice, or they say send the sales professional down if they're working with one, that's because the relationship has been formed. And this is done through building rapport and making all of your conversations centric to their reasons for selling, which is, of course, the motive. So it's through this that we were talking about over the last few weeks, initially about the orientation of their prospecting, get focused on the motive, and the eventual goal of your prospecting is to win listing presentation opportunities by invitation rather than solicitation. So I then say that you need to then move into a space of a connection where you want to connect with these sellers, and it's always about their level. So again, it's always centric to the motive, talking in around the motive, and product reinforcement built on a system that I really would like, if you are a sales team leader, to write down and start to think about. We call this our pre-list system, which is run inside of our prospecting. And what we want to do once we've identified the seller is immediately send them what we call the property seller's research guide, which is the framework and almost articulates our professional product, in that we say that, There's a difference between comparative value and market value. We abstain as much as we can from comparative value. It's not much more than a history lesson. It's not much more than something that is shared with the seller that just gives them a guide or an idea or a benchmark as to where the price might be. We make it very clear that that price is, that opinion, I should say, is subjective, and it's largely up to the individual. When you consider that it's not what they receive anyway, what they're going to receive is market value. That's where we come into play. There's an emphasis on us upscaling that. So what we then do is we improve that through marketing, communication, and negotiation in all three of those disciplines. So then there's all this service orientation then continues all the way through. So then when we moved from there, we moved into the space of, with in sales trainer, where we're talking about the listing presentation. We're also making that pretty much consistent with what we've sent out with the property sellers research guide. So back to the associates with prospecting, they're then sending out SMS texts. Even the sales professionals could be doing this if they're independently working for themselves and they've moved into that space and they're prospecting for themselves. The third thing is, once we've identified them, we're then sending out what we call, what you would be familiar with as the comparative market analysis. And we've just today had some of our team members out there successfully sending these out with a cover letter that I have designed. So those of you that have been part of it, we're now saying that once you're in identification, and I know there's some reluctance from property sellers given even the state of the market or what's happening with lockdown, and a lot of them are saying, I don't want to put my property on until we've found something to buy. So I'm giving loads of training to the sales associates on what to do and say, how to make it centric to the motive, which will then present opportunities in discussions for you to give advice rather than price. And one of the things that we're doing is, a week, or maybe in the second week, almost straight away, once we've identified a seller, sent out the property sellers research guide, we've got them onto that, we've got them onto texts with our results coming through. We're then moving into the space where we're sending them out a CMA that is devoid of our opinion, and a simple letter that pretty much starts like this. I'll just read it back to you. It says, hey there, property researcher, with the caption or in the text or in the headline, because it goes via email, of what's my property worth. And then it's just got the sellers' names, John and Mary. As we may have mentioned, there are two ways of looking at the value of your property, and I thought you might like some preliminary information on recent market activity to perhaps allow you to estimate the comparable value. This is the estimated worth of a property when compared with others recently sold, similar in location, accommodation, and to a degree, presentation. A reminder that this is merely a subjective opinion and ignores the also essential value variables that can enhance the value of your property. It's important to remember that to a home buyer, no two properties are exactly the same. This draft report, however, is a good starting point, and we're happy to share this with you. Then it says, what will my property sell for? Market value is what a property actually sells for, and this can be above or below the comparable estimation, and this can only be determined by taking the property to market. There are several factors that affect the value of your property, both positively and negatively, and this report does not take that into account. We influence the value positively through enhanced perception of the property via imaginative marketing, along with an upward implied value established by professional negotiation. And of course, skill communication contributes to value. If you'd like to discuss any aspect of the report, feel free to call anytime. Your property is worth more with us. Enjoy your day, and it's signed off by whomever sends that. Now, this is completely consistent. It almost plagiarizes in some ways the property sellers research guide, but we send that out and we haven't even been down to view the property, because this creates the premise for good exchange of discussion in and around the motive and what they're trying to do, where you can give advice that's centric to getting them on the market, but without actually asking, it is completely conducive to an invitation to a presentation rather than solicitation. Now, we've done the same thing in and again, in and around what we've done with the real estate rock stars. They're focusing on this as well. So they're not there again. Even these are the peak performers. These are the best of the best. And I'm talking in this group, we've got estate agents that at the very least are knocking on the door of selling somewhere between 50 and 100 properties per annum, or producing upwards or around, close north of, I should say, $500,000 per annum, all the way through to, we've got one in there that does nearly $2 million in fees. And these guys are still learning, and they're very much au fait with the concept of, closing. Instead of actually focusing on trying to sell someone something all the time, they're just making it easy for people to buy. So I implore you to have a look at that. Inside the new quarter, as we said, so we will be moving to explaining that state of origin. You need to have all these things in place, because if you want to put an origin place in, you want to take control of prospecting, you want to turn it into a profitable income stream, it's a give and take scenario. It's one that we'll be sharing. So in November, we'll be moving into specific training in and around STEAM. We'd love you to attend that. It's not until next month, so we're using the latter part of the year. We recognize that right now it is critical inside these real estate businesses to raise the number of listings that you have in front of you. So we are filtering through all of the upgrades that will be known as Prospector 4, which will be official in November, but we're already putting a lot of those things in place, and I guess road testing some new mediums, some new angles that we're using, and they're coming across very successful. So not least of which of those is the pre-list regime. I think there's 10 components to that once we've identified an active property seller, we just move them through, as I've already said, straight across with the property seller's research guide. We then move them onto the SMS platform of our results. We then push them, or we send them a CMA, which becomes a voice of contention. We then put them onto the market roundup, which is just sales results going out every week. We then show them some of the marketing mediums like the two-view platform that we can offer in or above. This can even be used inside of lockdown. We then send them out our accolades and our recommendations, case studies, which have been absolutely imperative. And this is something I've spent a lot of time talking to the guys in Sales Trainer and training on and around, which I think is very important. You've really got to get your salespeople well honed in and around the concept of not talking at prospects at listing presentations. It should be an education platform. So one where they're engaging and in fact teaching sellers the right way to choose an agent, teaching sellers the right way to market and communicate a perception around a property, teaching sellers that although they might see advertising as an expense, it has the magic of allowing a buyer to see more value in a property just because its perception has been greatly enhanced. So this becomes important as well. So also, these are all the things that we've got to consider between now and this, as I say, this new quarter or final quarter, or you might even want to call it post-lockdown quarter, because that seems to be the way that we're going. And you want to get things back on track. You want to re-engage that marketplace. So I implore you, if you don't have something like the Property Seller's Research Guide, even if you've got one of our earlier versions, which of course was called the Property Seller's Research Kit, please get in touch with me. I'd be more than happy to help you update that and get that utilized, not just as a prospecting tool, but more importantly, as a platform for your listing presentation and a flow-on effect that's going to be completely regenerate business. You want to start to really consider taking control of your prospecting, upping it to the right level, because again, those of you that do have the time and want to jump onto Cream and have a look at our recruitment platform, you know, if you can openly say to other agents out in the marketplace, if you come on board with us, we do all the prospecting for you, you're going to attract a better quality salesperson. And yes, whilst there is some work in retraining some more experienced salespeople, the dividend that they can pay, not least of which is if the longevity that you can derive if you get them on board and they can see the value in working with you. Then, of course, what we've got is NOCEMBER's on the way. What is NOCEMBER? Well, stay tuned, because on the next program that we have here, I'll be talking about setting up. So what you want to do is extend November into a 6 or 7 week month. This is far better for your production numbers and all of the things that we have to take into place, so that you've got your team working all the way up until the eve, or, you know, close enough to the eve of Christmas, and that you finish this year with a bang. So a long time ago, we decided to make November, sorry, we started to get rid of December and just call it NOCEMBER. It seems to have worked incredibly well. So I'll be sharing that and all the advancements that you need and all the moves you need to make ahead of your planning meeting. Just a general reminder, I hate being a cheeky bugger, but if your results aren't where they're at, it is most likely because last month you failed to put a planning meeting in place. You may not have a scoreboard up there in clear view that is keeping tally of the productivity in listing numbers, in sales numbers, and importantly, in where you're up to with prospecting. It's never too late to re-engage those things, but I can tell you the companies that are acutely aware of this, their numbers are just extraordinary. It was only just last week that I was talking to Kelly. You know, we're dealing with some great things that I did promise you we will be sharing with you, some changes inside the team and raising the standards. We just haven't had time to jump on board. And I know you're listening to this right now, Kel. But, you know, they've jumped out of the blocks. I was speaking to her on the 2nd or the 3rd of the month, and already they're up to something like about 14 listings because of the moves that we've made before, the moves that we've made around planning, and the control that we've wrestled in moving that company forward. So there it is. I hope that you've enjoyed that. And again, and I'll just close on this note, the big one is the listing presentation, and for you to eventually take control and formulate that. We'll be starting to share that with you before the year's out. In this quarter ahead, we will be introducing the listing presentation and, of course, that genius platform of Listing Pad, which you can present remotely, online, and can be winning you listings. And the beautiful thing about something like Listing Pad, should you decide to embrace it, you will finally have control and know what your salespeople are saying at listing presentations, what product they're offering, and it will start to bring everything into line. My name is Mark Dwyer. You can reach me at Mark with a K at corporatemanager.com.au, or you can telephone me on +61 410 592 165. And I've got to leave you with this because it's an important point and I really want you to ponder it right now. At any one time in your marketplace, are there more sellers that are looking to put their properties on the market than you actually need to be successful as an agency? If the answer is yes, then I say all we've got to figure out together is how you can make an instant connection with all of those sellers. And if you're then in a position where you are able to present to them, would that render you and your business with enough incoming listing business to make your business prosperous? And I think we all know the answer to that. So attack the real issue with strategy rather than just throwing work at the problem. Hope to catch you next week on the next installment of STEAMroom. And I hope to see you in November at STEAM, learning all the strategies and smarts so you can eventually take total control of your productivity progressively, leading your sales team.